here with me. We thought that we would start off the evening with a pre-concert talk in the form of a kind of an interview, Q&A with Sebastian. Sebastian happens to be a terrific violinist, a terrific violist, music educator, but also was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship in 2010. For those of you who aren't familiar with, yes, definitely deserves a round of applause. For those of you who may not be familiar with the MacArthur Award, it's a very prestigious fellowship that they, I guess, award every year, yes? But I think according to their website, I have it here, they're awarded to individuals who have shown extraordinary originality and dedication in their creative pursuits and market capacity for self-direction. So we're going to start off by, I have a few questions to start us off this evening, but I do envision this becoming kind of a discussion where the entire audience is engaged, so please feel free to jump into the discussion if you have some questions for Sebastian. It's not every day that you get to meet and talk to a MacArthur Fellow. So I'm going to start us off by asking Sebastian, it's been nearly 17 years now that you started Community Music Works. Can you tell us a little bit about the early days and why? Why did you start Community Music Works?
Sure. So first of all, we're just delighted to be here for this project with Music Haven, and thank you all for coming and for supporting Music Haven. This kind of collaboration is so rich for us because among the groups that have started things similar to Community Music Works, Music Haven is the most well established and sort of has, I think, the clearest direction. So it's just very exciting and inspiring to be here and to see the work that you all are doing and to be in the office and reading the messages on the wall. There just seems to be a lot of clarity of intention and just really great work. The beginning of Community Music Works came at a time when there wasn't as much in this field of kind of classical music, community engaged, social action, where there were careers that were clearly co-emphasizing performance and education. So it was less the case in the mid and late 90s than I think it is now. The very beginning, I had a public service fellowship from Brown to start this experimental music residency in a community in Providence. The idea was, could we create these careers for musicians that combined string quartet playing at a high level with a music education that was really focused on transformation. Sort of saying, if what we're really after here is positive social change for communities, then how is education an important tool towards social change? And therefore, one step further, what can music education be? So I would say some of the very frequent early difficulties were justifying and articulating this over and over. And people would quickly pigeonhole it and they'd say, oh, okay, I get it, that's just so wonderful. You're doing an outreach program for kids. And we'd say, well, yes, but it's not just that. And they would say, oh, I get it, you have a short-term residency for your quartet, and I get that. It was, well, it's not quite that either. And it just took a lot of time, and I'm sure you've had the same kind of difficulty of articulating and convincing people of exactly what it is Music Haven does. But it took time for people to understand that funny synergy between the two that we're really after and that we were convinced can be mutually beneficial for the community and for musicians.
Yeah, for us, it's definitely been a lot easier of a path to forge because we have CMW to point to. You guys are 10 years older, but for sure. That the models that people are used to seeing are kind of one or the other.
Yeah, and it's not only organizations like ours, but there seems that the crisis for large music institutions seems to have shaken up bigger institutions, right? So conservatories have hit a crisis point, and it took some time, but I think are coming around to this idea that there are larger kind of points of reference and fields of view that they need to be thinking about to train musicians to forget about making an impact, just to have a career, right? As the jobs in classical music become fewer, so organizations like Juilliard and Carnegie Hall started a fellowship program called the Academy, right? And New England Conservatory started and has run this fellowship for people learning about the Venezuelan system. So I think this is encouraging. So I think people coming out of conservatory now, there's a lot of entrepreneurship programs at conservatories and things, which I'm sure have problematic dimensions. But I think it's taking hold. It's easier for people now to think about doing this work.
Are there challenges attached also to it becoming much more of a, now that it is a lot more common for musicians to think in this way, and there are many more programs out there. Do you see it as you said it's encouraging? Do you also see that there are more challenges as well?
Well, I think one of the most interesting challenges, as I see it, is that we don't get so excited that this is the way for musicians to engage in the world that the pendulum stops swinging in this direction. So I don't know if anyone might want to jump in on this later, but I think there has been a 50-year cycle that we are really seeing, hopefully not the end of the swing, but certainly there's a lot of momentum in the swing. So it seems like in the late 50s, early 60s, there was this trend of big performing arts centers being built, important modern architecture going into them, Lincoln Center, raising city streets, and this is how you do community transformation: is you knock down tenements and you build fancy concert halls, right? So there was this kind of, and behind that, I think, there's this belief in art for art's sake. We tune out the noise of the city, build a thick limestone wall, and have your concert experience in a very sort of sanctuary atmosphere. And I think that showed up in the kinds of music that was being made then. This avant-garde, you have to sort of know what's going on, or you have no clue what's going on. The question of relevance is kind of insulting. Why should this be relevant? No, this is just about the purity of the art. And then at some point, 80s and 90s, people started saying, we pump money into these arts institutions, but nothing is happening for the better, right? So I think the kinds of work that we do got fueled by this reverse curve. People saying, actually, no, it's important that if we're going to invest in something, we have to see the public value of it. And the public value can't be for this elite few, and these people they stopped subscribing and going, and so this is a problem. And so we benefit, right, from this pendulum swing. And I guess the challenge is that we don't go so far in a direction that people say, well, this art isn't pure anymore. We have to go back to the way it used to be. And I think that there are enough examples when you think about when I think about the really great musicians who were also humanitarians, who cared about social causes, who were passionate educators. There are plenty of great examples, Pablo Casals, and a lot of the Soviet musicians, Rostropovich. You risk your life to make a statement, to help the world in some way. So I think there are a lot of great examples for us to hang onto to prevent this thing from going the other way. To say it's, you get too publicly engaged, you lose the edge. But I think that was the challenge.
Speaking of challenges, so it's been 17 years now, and so this organization it's been about almost half of your life that you've been leading this organization. Can you still hear me?
No.
No. Okay. Hello?
Carcinogen on the side. Here, use this.
Low battery, it says. I'm sure there have been many hills and valleys over the 17 years, but are there ones that stick out are salient in your memory of, particular successes, particular challenges that you remember?
Yeah. So, so about every day is a challenge. There's a certain nature of a growing organization, as you well know, where you never know what the daily challenge is going to be when you open your inbox, figuratively or metaphorically. So I think that the most challenging phases in community music works has been where there's a growth or expansion of definition of who we are, and where there's like a murky future, and you think, well, how do you manage some kind of transition or growth? I think that's an abstract way of saying it, but so this goes hand in hand with learning curves. I think for me as a leader, but also for the organization, learning how to be itself at various moments. I know that these sort of punctuated moments where we grew the organization, either by adding administrative staff or adding a fellowship program, or more recently expanding our performance model to be beyond a string quartet. There are these moments where you have more people, but you're not quite sure how to manage that larger initiative, really, a larger idea of self-definition. The advantage is when you've got more people, there's more momentum. So the very early days, it was that sort of existential weight feeling, like if I'm not doing it, nothing's happening, right? And I guess that's just the sort of small business startup phenomenon. But so that ends up feeling like you can never really rest because the organization needs, and you've got to provide for it. So here's a little anecdote. So when we started our fellowship program in 2006, this was an idea of responding to a greater demand in the neighborhood for student education programs, but also at the same time sharing this work with younger musicians who may want to take this path professionally and giving them the tools to do it. So our first thought was, we can barely keep up with ourselves just as 4 people. What's it going to be like when we have 2 new ones who have to learn from us? We were so sort of nervous about it, and managing more people's learning and all this stuff. And then within a month, we realized actually these are 2 more passionate, concerned, responsible people who can just push this cause further. So that was very energizing, challenging but totally energizing. Finding resources for this work is an ongoing challenge, right? Both on the institutional side, bringing large foundations, small foundations, family foundations into this lens of saying, what value is this work adding fundamentally to this city, to the region, to this field? And equally so with individuals. How does this work not only survive because it's an interesting initiative, which foundations are great at, but how does it survive as an important tenet of the community where you really need the individuals to step up and be sustainers? So I think, you know, setting pretty big ambitions, but then going out and talking to people and bringing more and more people into it to be able to sustain the work. It's sort of an ongoing challenge.
So on that note, actually, one of the things that I've always admired about CMW is just how much of a spirit of experimentation that you are able to embrace and encourage, and it extends to not only the students that you work with, but really the entire organization. You know, mistakes are kind of embraced as a path to learning, and sometimes it feels a little bit like you guys just throw things at a wall and see what sticks. When there is a climate, when we're in a climate where we're constantly being asked to measure impact and show measurable results, how do you retain that spirit? How do you keep on embracing that?
Yeah, so I think that I guess there's a couple ways of answering that question. It's a really interesting question. The simple exercise that we learned as just a meeting structure is probably familiar to many of you, but I think is actually quite profound, is after an event or a student program, to get together as a staff and not talk about the pluses and minuses, but to talk about the pluses and the deltas, so that you immediately force everybody into what went really well, and the delta is what could go better next time. Right, so that there's always this idea of, as soon as the thing is over, let's be thinking about how it could be improved, and then, but let it be as free as possible, you know, and kind of valuing, which I think is an ethic that comes from chamber music, valuing this idea that every voice is important, and that a good idea might come when you least expect it. The concert's tonight. We've been struggling with the tempo in this one section, and in the 11th hour, somebody says, you know what, did we ever think of it this way? Well, actually, that's the best idea yet. Makes the concert work. So there's some element, I think, of bleed over into the staff planning, which is like, well, let's think about what went well, what could go better. I guess that's one answer. In terms of impact, I think this is, there's a sort of challenge of concentric circles of impact, right? So if we're forcing ourselves to just say we're trying to get from A to B, and we have to prove that we're, doing the programs exactly this way, well, then it can be confining. But if you keep talking about the much larger impact, which in this work is about transformation, right? Transformation is a word in our mission statement. I think it's a different word, but it's a more spirit in the Music Haven mission statement. So if we're really thinking about how is music catalytic for our own lives as musicians, and for the lives of young people and their families and the neighborhood at large, then there are a lot of paths to that largest impact, right? And there's, I think, a lot of leeway. Somebody used the word last week, talking about this kind of work as subversive, right? Is it fun to be so subversive? Somebody asked. And so, in a way, well, yeah, there are many roads to that largest thing, and you can't get it right the first time, right? So there's got to be this sort of ongoing spirit of experimentation, because for many reasons, right? You try something, it works once, it doesn't guarantee it's going to work again. But I think that this is related, but one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is if we're really successful in what we're doing, we'll make ourselves obsolete, right? That's kind of the challenge to nonprofits is you identify a social issue or an issue that concerns the public sector, and you say, here is a solution to this challenge. And if we're really successful, it goes away, right? So it's hard when we're trying to just build and sustain and support people and really build the strength that an institution would provide, but not be institution builders, not say we're supposed to be doing this so that we can do it forever, but really say, no, we're doing this because we are still trying to find the answers to these systemic problems. And what does that mean for us, right? What would absolute victory mean? Would it mean that musicians are able to readily make careers that benefit the public in the most sort of widespread way? That music is sort of an essential part of community life, that whether you're rich or poor or black or white or Hispanic or what, that there is this opportunity for learning music and that it's a fundamental part of your community life. So, you don't need a Community Music Works or a Music Haven anymore, right? But to get there, and this is a word I saw in your office today as the first on the list of an effective nonprofit, is advocacy, right? How are we not only advocating for ourselves, but continuing to think about this larger issue we're concerned about and try to put ourselves out of business at the end of the day?
Anybody else have a question? Wish this mic was working.
I'll talk loud.
Okay.
Could you speak a little bit to what you've seen since you've been doing this for longer, in terms of the immediate and extended community impact that you've had?
Anyone hear the question? Questions about immediate and longer term community impact as we've seen it at Community Music Works. I think that the impact on the community is one of the, so far for us, most challenging things to measure. It's, in a way, simpler to look at the group of kids who've come through our program and to follow where they've wound up and to try and speculate whether some of their success had anything to do with their involvement with us. And you can do a lot of things to try to understand that dynamic better. But I think one of the more interesting questions is, what impact has this had more generally on the community? And it's really hard to know. One of the current projects at Community Music Works is a series of concerts in different non-concert venues around our neighborhood, including gymnasiums and community centers that have been a kind of staple of our concert life in this neighborhood, but also including vacant commercial storefronts that we occupy for a month and an abandoned house, and really trying to spread ourselves around the neighborhood with performances in a different kind of way. This is funded by a group called Art Place. It's a new initiative of a lot of national foundations. And so our challenge with Art Place is really the same as the challenge more generally. How do we know if somebody walking past had an impression of what's going on that makes them think differently about the place they live, even if they don't come in and sign their kid up for lessons? What does it mean to musicians who are coming out of a degree program and saying, oh, there's a few options besides getting an orchestra job? Like, look what Tina's doing, New Haven. Look, I could do that. So there's that sort of intangible impact that it makes on the field. And then there's a problematic dimension, which is we've seen over the course of our tenure so far that the way the people who are looking to get their kids into our program, the demographic profile of those people has gradually changed. So, whereas we really set out at the beginning to say, we're looking to provide this opportunity to kids who would at least be likely to have this opportunity otherwise. Well, it turns out that families who can afford it, could afford to send their child to a private music education, are starting to choose this, and they meet our neighborhood criteria. They have to live in a certain neighborhood to be eligible. And so suddenly people are seeking this out as a great way to have their kid involved in music, because there's a community dimension, there's this professional musician mentoring part, the kids have this really wonderful peer community, this is a really positive place. So that's a really interesting and yet problematic impact on the community, that we're starting to become a resource in a different way maybe than we thought we were to the community, right? So we don't reject that idea. You know, we don't reject the family who might be able to afford the lessons. We think, okay, a diverse community in all respects is a strong community if you can achieve some sort of coherence. And I guess what I would like to say is that the impact we make on young people is the most concentrated outcome of our work. And that they then make an impact on their peers, and that impact spreads to their families, and that impact spreads to, you know, their educational ambition, and they might stay in school longer or pursue higher education. That there's an impact by investing deeply in the kids, and that over a generation, these kids will come back and work in the city, and they'll have had this experience, and there'll be a different level of kind of strength in this neighborhood because the kids are leading that strength. It's too soon to say, right? It's too soon to say what's happening. It is encouraging that kids want to come back, though. So some of our kids who are in college are coming back and teaching at our summer program. So that's like, we're crazy about that. That's great, right? That they want to come back and give back to the other kids in the community. Because I guess the vision for all this is it has to be reciprocal. It has to be, there has to be a cycle to this. It can't just be output of the part of musicians. It has to come back and be regenerating, and then have a new crop of musicians thinking this way about careers be developed.
You mentioned that they were choosing, people who could afford private lessons were choosing to send them to your organization. Do you imagine that your organization might also help influence those other private instructors to get more involved with the community, or for whatever reason the families are choosing your organization over that option? Do you see helping influence the community in that way by also evolving the thinking of the other private music instructors?
Yeah, so the question is, are we able to make an influence, or interested in making some impact on other music educators because of the way we're doing things? It's an interesting question. You know, I don't feel like we've got it down enough yet to make that claim. I think what we do really well is provide the atmosphere that kids do form a really great sense of camaraderie among peers, a really great sense of relationships with the adults in our community, the teachers. I don't think we're the best at delivering music education, right? So it's not that we don't intend to be, but it's just I don't think that's happened. So I think it would be too soon for us to make that claim that we could teach other music educators how to do what they do better. I don't think we're good enough for that. But I do think there is this ethic of how to, stimulate a community of learners, become sort of mutually reinforcing and things. I guess that has happened to some extent. There's some local summer chamber music camps that our kids have gone to, run by the Rhode Island Philharmonic and Music School. So the music school there is our big, very successful, very high quality community music program. And what's been nice is it was 4, 5, 6 years ago that our kids would go there and be the least advanced and kind of, trying to strive to keeping up in those groups and things. And now that's not an issue anymore. They can sort of play at the level of the other kids. But what I've heard sort of anecdotally is they do sort of create this nice atmosphere among peers just because that's their expectation of how you hang with peers in music education. So that's kind of gratifying, right? That there might be this sort of subversive ripple.
Yes, please.
I don't know whether this, I'm speaking out of an experience I recently had where I gave a 4-year-old kid a ride somewhere, and I would guess that this kid had never heard classical music before, but I had WSHU on, and there was a Mozart symphony playing, and when we got to his apartment, he said, "Miss Linda, can we sit here and listen? This is a nice song," he goes. And so we sat there and listened, and then his mom came out to drag him in, and I said, you might want to consider someday music lessons. He's really interested. She said, well, that'll happen. It wasn't just that it was the cost, it was this music has nothing to do with us. This is snooty music. It's basically what she said, and I thought, I get it, but do you deal with that kind of preconception much? And what do you do about it? Because I was sort of at a loss for words, and I'm wondering, but here's this kid, he loved it.
In terms of classical music, interestingly enough, we haven't really encountered so much of that.
That's good.
I think that at least the kids that we have enrolled in our programs are just really thrilled to just start an instrument. Mm-hmm. Something that we also, I think we're very inspired by community music works in the early years was just thinking very broadly about music in general, not being constrained to, yes, tonight you're going to be hearing Bach, Britten, and Beethoven, obviously in the classical tradition and very much in the canon of classical repertoire, but as far as what we perform in terms of other concerts and also the things that we perform with our kids, we try as much as possible to learn from what they're listening to, as much as, this is something that we're really passionate about and we'd like to share it with you. In fact, just on Friday, this past Friday, I don't know if Joe is here, but we run a class that is part orchestra, part community mediation. It's a leadership training program for our middle school age kids, and they're trying to organize a flash mob. They would actually kill me if I told you guys that, because they really they want to keep it a secret. But they listed a whole number of songs that they wanted to play for their flash mob, and I probably knew about 4 of the 20 songs. So I went home and clicked on YouTube and listened to everything that they listened to. So I think. We haven't really encountered so much of that. I think that when it becomes kind of reciprocal, I think there's much more kind of openness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the early experiences that I had with that concern in mind was when we were first starting out and I was going into one of the community centers to do the violin lessons on a weekly basis, I thought, maybe some of the families we're working with will think, what does this have to do with me, right? That there would be this preconception about who classical music is intended for, and it's, I don't want any part of that. And the overwhelming reaction I got, first of all, from students was just curiosity. So the guy in your car had that too. He's like, wow, let's just see what this is about. So, and the added dimension of what's this wooden box that I get to put under my chin and try this out, right? There's this just really wonderful curiosity that kids bring. The reaction that I think I was nervous about, but happily surprised from parents was, are you sincerely trying to work with my child on something that is of value? And in a way, it matters less what it is, as long as you are really there as a person with integrity to offer something to my child and you really care about them. And you're going to be here again tomorrow. That was overwhelmingly the feeling. And there was some skepticism. We would go on the... there was and is, I guess, from parents, this sense of like, I'm not sure if this has anything to do with me. Okay, we'll go to the orchestra concert. But, and it's usually just a matter of getting enough of a feeling of invitation into the situation where that feeling of I don't belong here is powerful for anybody.
Yeah.
You go to a place, you look around, take one look, there's no one who looks like you, you don't belong here, you already start to feel like, okay, I don't belong, therefore I'm not going to really take this in, it's not intended for me. So to bridge that, I think the value of programs like Music Haven and Community Music Works is that we are place-based, and we're working in a way that people want to go far to engage with us and are in their schools or community centers. So there isn't this physical change of venue to encounter this stuff. And that's, of course, intentional. But then beyond that, how do you create that feeling of an invitation? And I think it's as much about, being open to what a kid wants to bring in terms of music. It's about just showing authentic human concern for the parents and saying, let's do this together, we all care about your kid. And eventually that resistance starts to melt away a little bit.
Michael.
What is this transformation, how does it play out? That's the term that I've heard a lot and I value it enormously. How does it play out for the professional musicians in your program, and also how does it play out for the students?
So, we've thought a lot about the word, right? About the word transformation. And I think there are many different ways to focus on it. We had a really wonderful workshop with one of the administrators of the Silk Road project, the Yo-Yo Ma ensemble and related educational programs and museum programs. And so one of the administrators came and talked about transformation as they see it, which is an unforgettable moment, right? That Yo-Yo Ma and these other amazing musicians will come in and they'll have done, the schools will have done plenty of preparation for kids throughout the course of the year, and then the ensemble comes, and there's something that's just so awe-inspiring and connects to what they've learned that you as a child never forget this. And therefore, in some ways, it stays with you and it's transformative. And I think I totally buy that. I think there's this power in a transformational moment. We go at it really differently, though. For us, it's about the accumulation of small moments over a long period of time, both for the professionals and for the students. So, for our young people, the idea is, if they can be part of this for a number of years, which many of them what does it mean to just have sort of the most basic level, a consistent presence from this group of adults and peers in your life week after week, year after year? And then, what is that collection of moments where you are sort of achieving something more and more complex? And then what is the experience of these punctuated moments where you, like for one of our teenagers, came to the point where we were playing the Mendelssohn Octet, and she said, she after the concert, she said, "That was amazing." And we're like, "Yeah, isn't that a great piece?" No, you don't get it. That was like really great. Like, I want to put that on my iPod. And we're like, "Yeah, like it's just really good." No, like you know that one part with the cellos and they're like beating against the other guy. So she flipped out. So she'd been in the program like 6 years already. But it was like the first moment where she actually heard the music as something she would want to listen to in her spare time just because it's cool. So that couldn't have happened the first day, you know? Because now she had this whole set of relationships and this whole set of reasons why this could come in. You know, and that's like, okay, well that's a really nice moment. That's accumulation of many things that has led to that. And I think, you know, that's a simple story in a sense, but what I'm more interested in is actually the same kid, is a phenomenal kid, came from a lot of challenges at home, and sort of middle of high school, wanted to drop out, wasn't so into high school, you know, sort of came around that curve, wound up at Smith College, right, so very selective college and a full scholarship. And you know, you're excited about those kinds of things happening, but the biggest piece of that is, can this accumulation of experiences lead somebody to want the widest lens for themselves, right? The widest lens of like, what's out there for me? And it's not just this, and it's not just this, but actually there's a huge wide lens. And I find that's the goal of doing the whole thing. The same is true, I won't answer it as long, but the same is true for the professional musicians. You know, it's like, how do you grow a concept of what your music means? And how does that gradually evolve? I think that's the one.
I do know that we're kind of running up against probably the concert time. I have one last question, if that's okay. One of the other things that I've always admired about Sebastian is that it's, again, been 17 years, but you always seem, and you know, for anybody out there who has run a nonprofit or is working for a nonprofit, it can always sometimes seem like a marathon every day, and Sebastian always seems indefatigable. And I'm just wondering where you draw your inspiration. It's a very broad question, but...
this is not true. It's a sort of rosy perception, but thank you. I think that the sustaining, I mean, it is hugely exhausting, right? And the challenges are so many, and it's, you know, some days you finish a day of teaching, you think I'm a complete failure as a teacher, and nothing I tried worked. And some days you feel the same way about your organizational leadership, and when you're playing, I mean, it's just like, hugely challenging. But I think this is something I was talking with a leader of a program that's only 2 years old in Boston the other day, and we had this opportunity to do a talk together. And we got to, there was a question at the end of the thing about, what is your vision? You know, what, if you could just boil it all down, what is your vision? And she started talking about respect, and wanting to find a way to increase the level of respect between people in different parts of society. And I thought, you know, for me, I think the vision, it's very personal. And for me, it's about, I know that music occupies a very internal, like almost spiritual place for me in my life. And what I see it is, where it resides in me, right? And so all the work is really driven not by some altruistic, I'm trying to do good for society thing, but it's really quite selfish. I'm trying to wrestle with, so in her case, it was like she was really trying to wrestle with respect. And I think for me, it's like, how do you wrestle with music growing in, well, actually it's not even about music, it's just some sort of spiritual question of how can you make an environment where people can come together and be better off for it. And I suspect that's true of all of us who are crazy enough to go out and do one of these projects, right? Is that there's some sort of selfish thing that you're kind of after fulfilling. And all of the work can get done because you're always trying to answer this question. I know it's true of you. You never sleep. And so I think I get more rest than you do. You've made a lot more happen in a short time than we did at CMW. So the same must be true of you. But I want to say, once again, thank you to all of you who support Music Haven. This is just every time we come, it just seems like this community of musicians and supporters and audience members and kids just continues to grow really beautifully. And congratulations to you and to all of you.
No.
Do you?
Oh, are you serious? Well, it got